My betrothed ended up proposing to my own sister. Everyone assumed I'd completely lose it. Even my parents, Robert and Elaine, advised me to back off for my sister's sake. Yet, much to everyone's astonishment, I maintained my composure and offered my blessing. And then, believe it or not, I went ahead and announced my engagement to Ethan, a man hailing from a family so opulent it made headlines. Enough of the theatrics, I was ready to embrace a life of true happiness. Today was meant to be our engagement celebration with Liam, but Liam was nowhere in sight. I couldn't get a ring on him by phone, and even his parents were just as baffled. The entire room was alive with murmurs and whispers. Grabbing a microphone from a passing waiter, I raised my glass and declared, "Sorry, everyone. It appears my betrothed must be preoccupied with something rather important." Before I could continue, Liam burst in hand with my sister Sophie. They intercepted my words right at the entrance. "Truly sorry," Liam said as he released Sophie's hand, then, adopting a serious tone, pulled her into an embrace. Approaching me with his hand outstretched, he murmured, "I'm sorry about this." I set my glass down, handed him the mic, and stepped aside. Liam nodded gravely and turned to address the crowd. "Everyone, and Arya, I'm deeply sorry. Our engagement is off. Today I want all of you to witness that the only person I've ever truly wanted to marry is her." Then, turning to Sophie, he dropped to one knee and asked with heartfelt sincerity, "Sophie, will you marry me?" Sophie remained silent for a heartbeat. Her eyes met mine and then shifted down at Liam, with tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. It was painfully clear that she felt conflicted. Having hijacked my own celebration like this was far from what she expected. Yet Liam continued to hold her hand, attempting to reassure her as guests paused and exchanged whispers. Questions like, "Weren't these two families supposed to be linked all along? Now it's someone else?" Or, "I heard Liam once fancied Arya. Won't Arya put up a fight?" I smiled with genuine warmth, urging Sophie, "Come on, sis. What are you waiting for? Just say yes." To my shock, she burst into even more tears, shaking her head and sealing her lips shut in protest. Liam, unable to bear her anguish, turned sharply to me and growled, "Arya, stop tormenting Sophie. If there are issues, handle them with me. She's innocent here." I fired back, "What does that have to do with me?" Not missing the chance to add a cutting remark, "You're out of your mind." The atmosphere tensed immediately, and my friends rushed over, fearful I might start a scene, and tried to pull me away. "Arya, don't be upset. We can talk later. Are you all right? Let's step aside for a moment." Even my parents, Robert and Elaine, approached and patted my shoulder, saying, "Your sister has always leaned on you. She just wants Liam. Be considerate and let her have him." I sighed and waved them off. "Enough, everyone. I need a word," I insisted, grabbing another mic as I pushed past my friends. Not far off, Sophie was crouched on the floor, weeping into Liam's embrace. With all eyes on me, I stepped closer and spoke clearly into the speakers. "With all my heart, I wish Sophie and Liam every happiness." Sophie lifted her tear-stained face from Liam's chest, her eyes red as if about to cry anew, and said, "Arya, save the theatrics." I cleared my throat and continued, "I'd also like to extend an invitation to everyone." Mid-sentence, the ballroom doors swung open, and someone strolled in slowly. People shifted aside as murmurs erupted. "Isn't that Ethan? What is he doing here? Did Ethan really come to see the spectacle?" I linked my arm with Ethan's and smiled broadly. "You're all invited to Ethan and my engagement party on the 21st of next month," I announced. A heavy silence fell over the room. Unlike families that rested on generations of privilege, Ethan's lineage boasted a long, illustrious legacy in politics. At just 20, Ethan had swiftly made his mark in business, dominating the local economy in a mere 5 years. A veritable young mogul from a top-tier family. No one dared cross this modern-day prince. At that very moment, Sophie, with Liam's support beside her, looked aghast and whispered, "Arya, don't joke about this. We can't afford such frivolities." Confused, I tilted my head. "Joke? What joke?" Liam wrapped an arm protectively around her, saying, "Today's on me. Name your price, but don't mess with his family." My father, Robert, finally caught up, pushing through the crowd with a worried look. Arya, don't be hasty. Do you even know who this is? Before I could respond, Ethan stepped back with me, and Robert continued, apologetically. Ethan, my younger daughter didn't intend any offense, but you seem to be missing something. I handed him the mic. Ethan lowered his gaze slightly, then, in a calm tone, said, Since Arya has invited you all, you're very welcome at our engagement party on the 21st, and may Sophie and Liam find true happiness. Sigh, he dropped the mic, its thud echoing like a final stamp of approval throughout the hall. A sudden knock silenced the room before chatter erupted anew. Young men and women buzzed with excitement. We thought Arya had it bad. But something feels off, doesn't it? I mean, Liam switching fiancés at the last minute, yet Arya was ever so ready. I missed it before, but isn't Arya from the Gardens? That's her family name, right? We're all just pawns in their elaborate game. Their lively gossip didn't go unnoticed. Ethan, clearly entertained, gave the group an approving nod. Following his gaze, the excited murmur only grew louder. What's with you all acting like you're shipping a couple? Aren't you supposed to be high society? I sighed, ruffling Ethan's hair lightly. Tone it down. The very next day, the headlines exploded. News of my engagement to Ethan with his wholehearted blessing spread like wildfire. Since yesterday afternoon, my phone had been ringing off the hook. Robert peppered me with questions about how I'd managed to get tangled up with Ethan, accusing me of jeopardizing his plans. By morning, his tone shifted sharply. Arya, you really need to impress Ethan. The future of our family depends on you now. I paused, tapping my finger thoughtfully at his last line. It was amusing. Robert had never possessed the knack for business. It was always Liam who had been the backbone for years. For 2 decades, our family's future had seemingly rested on Liam's shoulders. That's why, when they discovered Liam's dalliance with Sophie, they swiftly abandoned me. My parents had always favored my delicate, ailing sister and were eager to see her wed. But back when Liam pursued me relentlessly, they couldn't force a change. Now that Liam was with Sophie, they'd gotten exactly what they desired. Just as these thoughts raced through my mind, Ethan came over carrying a plate of fruit and sat beside me. What's on your mind? He inquired. I picked up a grape, sighed dramatically, and muttered, Biased parents, a drama queen sister, a faithless fiancé, and poor, innocent me. Ethan took my hand, mimicked my tone by raising a grape to his lips, and sighed. Poor fiancé nearly got bullied. And here's that fruit thief who knows too much about my past. I suppose my attempt at feigned misery fell flat. They want me to charm you. I offered him another grape, and he took it effortlessly, his voice lazy as he quipped. You think they'll wait a few days for a son-in-law like me? Since Ethan and I are getting engaged, it's only natural that our families meet. Besides, they'll surely try to curry favor with Ethan, if only they can hold off on reeling in this big fish without scaring him off. I continued feeding him grapes as we debated. Perhaps a week? Ethan turned his head, certain. A day. The very next day, Ethan found himself trapped in tedious small talk in my parents' living room, while I retreated to my room to pack up and move into Ethan's place. Moments later, the door opened and Sophie entered, clutching a cup of coffee and offering a warm smile. Arya, I ground these beans myself just for you to try, she said. I couldn't help but notice the scattered kiss marks on her collarbone. Sophie had long ceased pretending. Impressive, sis, I remarked. She hesitated at the doorway, still smiling weakly. Oh, what's wrong? I set aside the clothes I'd been folding, retrieved my phone from the table, and deliberately switched it off before tossing it onto the bed. Hand over your phone, I commanded. Sophie hesitated. What are you doing? I blinked, giving her a choice. Either turn it off or leave. After a tense moment, the phone in her bag, already recording, was shut off. She closed the door too. Her smile vanished as her tone grew icy. I've been wondering since yesterday. How did you manage to land Ethan? It seems you have a few tricks up your sleeve. I shrugged. These tricks, they're hardly as effective as yours. In our family, our parents especially, treated you like something fragile since you were born prematurely. They sheltered you from everything, and in doing so, you developed quite a dark streak. Ever since you were 5, you've been snatching things you believed were rightfully yours. Like extra attention from our parents, praise from teachers, and even my former fiancé, Liam. You employed every tactic, from playing the helpless victim to throwing subtle accusations. You did manage to take plenty from me, even if I considered most of it trivial. Perhaps you thought you were destined for success? A small, secretive laugh escaped me. Ignoring my own comment, Sophie sipped her coffee nonchalantly. I spent 15 minutes grinding these beans. It's quite good. Want a taste? I echoed, yes, it's a shame. For a few moments, silence enveloped the room. Then she set the cup down and declared, "You can't marry Ethan. You're simply not good enough for him." I nodded, challenging. "Oh, and what about you?" Her eyes flashed with panic at being confronted, but she quickly masked her true intentions, feigning sincere concern. "Ethan is out of your league, Arya. I'm just looking out for you." I sat on the bed, pondering aloud. Is it that I'm not worthy, or do you simply want him for yourself? Was Liam never enough? Sophie blurted. Liam and I are genuinely in love. Then, pausing as if struck by a realization, she whispered, "Did you really allow this?" With a small, dismissive smile, I raised a finger as if counting off a point. "Weren't you the one who claimed that true love exists between you and Liam? Let's revisit the timeline. Was it at the engagement party 2 days ago, during all those secret meetings over the years, or perhaps that night after our college exams?" A sudden loud knock and the crash of a ceramic cup shattering startled us all downstairs. We hurried up, only to find Sophie slumped on the floor in my room, clutching her stomach and wincing in pain. Her once pristine loungewear was stained with coffee, and shards of the broken cup lay scattered nearby. I merely watched, expression unreadable. Our mother, Elaine, was visibly pained. She rushed over to Sophie, anxious and worried, gently helping her to stand. "What happened? Are you all right?" she cried. Sophie looked up weakly, tears streaming. "It hurts, Mom. Don't blame Arya. I simply lost my balance. I swear I didn't push anyone." Our usually composed mother, now heartbreakingly furious, bellowed, "Arya, she's your sister, and she's carrying your nephew. How dare you push her?" Her agitation grew, and in her haste to strike me, she nearly rose, but instead stumbled, almost kneeling on Sophie. Sophie's crying faltered for a moment as I fought the urge to laugh, keeping a deadpan expression. When people are embarrassed, they tend to overreact. Elaine hurriedly stepped away from Sophie, then yelled at my father, Robert. Robert, do something, call a doctor." Before he could move, Ethan blocked his path in the doorway, calmly saying, "Hold on, Robert." The entire room's attention turned to me as I slowly rose from my seat and clapped softly. You know what? Sophie's performance after all these years is unparalleled. But today, it seems the final act has arrived. Elaine, still in disbelief, demanded, "What nonsense are you spouting? Why are you stopping your father from getting help? Do you want harm to befall your sister and her unborn child?" I furrowed my brows and, looking to Ethan for support, he raised his hand and gently tapped the door, signaling Elaine to quiet down. "Don't worry," he said. "The last person here who would wish harm upon Sophie isn't you." Unsatisfied, I took matters into my own hands. I picked up 2 phones from the bed and then retrieved Ethan's phone from behind some books on the desk. I showed everyone the recording screen. Instantly, Sophie's crying ceased, replaced by evident panic and fear. Our parents exchanged glances, and the room, usually filled with chatter, fell eerily silent. Not wanting to prolong the tension, I linked the projector to Ethan's phone and started playing the video from the beginning. In the opening minutes, I was the only one present, folding clothes in quiet routine. Then Sophie entered, coffee cup in hand. As the minutes ticked by, I asked pointedly, "Let me guess, when did true love begin between you and Liam? Was it at the engagement party a few days ago? Or during those secret rendezvous over the years? Or after those grueling college entrance exams?" Sophie's face went pale. She took a couple of steps toward me, her eyes blazing with fury. "What absurdity are you talking about?" she spat. The video clearly captured my voice, replying, "Hotel room 17 on the 10th floor. I even helped you erase the footage of you two tangled in that hallway." At these words, Sophie whirled around, grabbed her coffee, and splashed it over herself. Her voice dripped with venom as she retorted, "So what? That's what you owe me?" Then, without missing a beat, she smashed the cup onto the ground, expertly dodging the shards, and collapsed, clutching her stomach in agony. The commotion downstairs had everyone scrambling to see what was happening. The final seconds of the video showed me approaching the camera, and as the recording ended, the room fell silent once more. Elaine's face froze in a mix of pain and disbelief. "Sophie, how could you?" Robert's face flushed as he scolded her. "What are you doing?" Sophie's tears flowed unabated as she clutched Elaine's hands so tightly her knuckles turned white. I just stop, she pleaded. I clapped my hands to cut her off, saying coolly, "I'm merely here to reveal the truth. I have no interest in what unfolds next." Ethan and I had other engagements, so we prepared to leave. My words seemed to jolt Sophie from her stupor. "Arya, you're doing this on purpose. You want to ruin me? Take everything from me. You just want to hurt me," she accused, as Elaine moved in to pull her back with a sharp smack. Sophie stood, stunned, disbelief written all over her face, as Elaine's hand retreated, revealing a growing mark on Sophie's cheek. Muttering, "How did you become like this?" Sophie retorted bitterly. "You hit me for her? Mom, you've forgotten how many times I sacrificed for you, how I gave everything for Liam. What did I do wrong?" Elaine faltered, her hand trembling. "Mom just saw what you did," Sophie sneered. "I was only protecting my love in my own way." "Mom, what about you? Are you really going to side with Arya without knowing all the facts?" Elaine shook her head, preparing to speak, when I interrupted. "All right, big sis, you're always right, but let me ask one question." The entire room fixed its gaze on me as I turned to Sophie. "Is this the first time you've been struck? How did it feel?" Sophie's face turned a mix of blue and red, the slap mark on her cheek making her look almost comical. I laughed out loud. "If you have nothing to say, then fine. We've witnessed enough of the drama. It's time for everyone to leave and let you all sort this out." Before long, Robert and Elaine ushered Ethan and me to the door. Just as I climbed into the car, Elaine grabbed my sleeve. "Arya, just remember, if Sophie ever dreams of a career in showbiz, have her give me a call." Ethan, with a playful grin, added, "After all, her talent is extraordinary." Elaine's face fell. Her hands clenched in silence as I offered a low-key goodbye. "We're off, Mom." As the car door closed, I exhaled deeply, a late epiphany arriving all too late. Growing up, Sophie had pulled stunts like this too often. How could someone so adept at evasion never slip up? Yet, our parents' eyes had always been skewed, attuned only to what they wished to see and hear. They'd ignored my desperate calls for help, always supporting Sophie, the supposedly vulnerable one, time and again. Thankfully, that era was long past, and I had ceased to care. At Ethan's place, I was ready to catch up on some extra sleep after the previous night's ordeal, which had left me utterly exhausted. No sooner had I settled in than Robert called, practically ordering us to bring Ethan over for dinner the very next day. Everyone knew that dinner was merely a pretext. I didn't want my appetite ruined, so I insisted on bringing Ethan along early, hoping to avoid the midday meal. True to form, Sophie's dramatic performance had given us the perfect excuse to leave early. The spring sunshine was ideal for a nap. But no sooner had I laid down than someone restless sidled up. "Exhausted?" a voice mumbled from beneath the covers. "Yeah," I replied, barely audible. In the next second, I felt the bed dip as Ethan pulled me into his arms, dislodging the blanket so that I found myself face to face with his striking features. "You won't renege on our bet from yesterday, will you?" he teased. "Bet? What bet?" I asked, confused. He reminded me of the wager about how long my parents would tolerate him as their son-in-law. I had boasted they couldn't last more than a week, but as I recalled my own promise, my ears burned with the memory. "Can we not discuss this in public?" Ethan squinted with a playful threat. "You won't go back on it, will you?" I laughed and said, "Of course not." Before I could finish, Ethan silenced me with a kiss, swallowing my words whole. I've never been able to resist Ethan's kisses. When he finally let me go, my eyes welled with tears from shortness of breath. "I am exhausted," I confessed. Ethan nestled closer, lightly nibbling on my lower lip. "I'll nap with you." I feebly tried to push him away. "Move aside, Ethan," but he simply laid down beside me, softly adding, "Rest well and enjoy the show later." 3 days later, Liam declared his intent to host an engagement party with Sophie. Invitations were dispatched to Ethan, who then playfully slammed an invite into my hand, grinning mischievously. "Let's go watch the show." I smiled and accepted the invitation. Outside the venue, as a sleek Maybach pulled up, Ethan stepped out, walked around the front, and opened the door for me. I took his arm as we entered together. This engagement party was on a grander scale, more meticulously planned, held in a larger venue, and even attracting media attention. I scanned the room and commented, "True love, huh? This certainly requires more effort than my own party." Ethan chuckled and said, "You call that effort?" I grinned back, "Just average." The space was filled with elite individuals, well-dressed CEOs, celebrities, and influencers, mingling over drinks. It was clear that these weren't the type you could invite on a whim. I wondered if there had been some recent stir between the families that I had missed. Soon, my question was answered. As Ethan and I entered, our arrival drew the crowd's attention. Not far off, someone was eyeing Ethan, a wineglass in hand. I patted Ethan's arm. "Looks like they followed you here because of your reputation." With his wealth, striking looks, and impeccable background, Ethan stood out like a modern-day prince. Ever since he'd built his reputation in town, he'd kept a spotless record and shunned scandals. Suddenly, emerging with a mysterious fiancé stirred everyone's curiosity. After a bit of gossip and speculation, since Sophie was my only biological sister and her engagement was underway, the buzz was that perhaps I had brought Ethan along as well. This might be one of the rare times the elite would finally meet him. Not long after, Liam emerged from the throng, drink in hand, beaming at us. "Arya, Ethan!" A waiter passed by with 2 glasses of wine. I accepted one, raised it in a toast, and Ethan sipped his while turning back to join the lively crowd. I found a table, set my glass down, and pretended to nap, hoping to dodge prying eyes. Inevitably, a concerned voice approached. "Miss, are you all right? Let me help you upstairs to rest." I closed my eyes and smirked silently, thinking, it seems the real drama is about to begin. Soon after, the maid guided me to a private room, gently stripping off my outerwear and covering me with a blanket before closing the door. Once alone, I fumbled for the dress laid on the bed, dressing in the near darkness. The room was stark, immaculately clean, devoid of closets or hiding spots, with only one door that offered no escape. Resigned, I settled on the sofa by the window, massaging my sore shoulders. What surprise do you think Sophie has in store for me? I mused aloud. A faint electronic chime came from the left earring, followed by Ethan's cool voice. "You can expect something. She's not going to be gentle at all." I retrieved the blanket, draping it around me as I returned to the sofa. "That's a rather dismal conclusion," I muttered. Ethan scoffed. So sad it's almost laughable. I chuckled, genuinely curious about what scheme Sophie might unveil that day. Moments later, sounds emanated from the door. Instinctively, I clutched the blanket tighter as the door slowly creaked open. The hallway's bright light forced me to squint, and I could barely distinguish 2 figures quietly entering and beginning to undress. A hoarse male voice commanded, "Hurry up, take the photos and get out." Another lower, anxious voice added, I know. We haven't even turned on the lights yet." I could barely make out shapes as they fumbled near the bed, seemingly searching for someone. "Where's she? Weren't you supposed to be on the bed?" I counted down the seconds in my mind. Turn on the lights and check. When time was up, the door flung open and light poured in. I quickly covered my eyes with the blanket, not wanting to witness what I shouldn't. With the sound of a switch being flipped, Ethan's voice cut in icily. "Oh? Are we having some artistic nudes taken by 2 gents?" Before I could react further, David, one of Ethan's aides, dragged the 2 men in waiter uniforms out the door. One of them, sporting a small camera around his neck, kneeled briefly at the exit. "Who sent you?" I asked. They exchanged a brief glance before replying. "It was Sophie. She wanted us to capture some scandalous photos of you. She specifically demanded that your full face be visible." I smiled politely and walked away. "Ethan, call the police," I instructed, my tone steady. For the past 20 years, Sophie had always placed herself above me. That very night when I finally forced her to move out, she vowed never to let me forget it. As expected, she showed no warmth toward me. Downstairs, the wedding banquet was in full swing. On a large screen at the end of the runway, cherished childhood photos of Liam and Sophie were being displayed. Oddly, many of these moments included snapshots of me alongside Liam from days when he had courted me. Who could tell when Sophie had seized the opportunity to make those memories exclusively hers? In a side corner on stage, a pianist played the wedding march, filling the room with melodic blessings. Thwer kundo. Ethan followed behind me, his arm wrapped around me, remarking, She should appreciate your return gift. Glancing down at Sophie's beaming smile, I sighed quietly. I hadn't planned on giving her anything. My sister had always been naive, rushing headlong without leaving any options for herself. Perhaps it was my indulgence over the years that had rendered her so reckless. Then, the photos on the big screen transitioned to engagement snapshots. The host gestured for Sophie and Liam to step onto the stage. Holding hands, they walked forward, smiling at each other as they prepared to speak. At that moment, a recording came through the speakers. A recording of my conversation with Ethan. The audio was low but unmistakably clear. My recent musing about what surprise Sophie might have prepared for me. The clip then detailed how one waiter had revealed that Sophie had arranged for scandalous photos of me, clearly showing my full face. On stage, Sophie's face drained of color as she tugged Liam to shut off the monitors. "Who's controlling this? Turn it all off!" she demanded, but it was too late. Ethan's team had blocked access to the projector room, and the big screen continued playing. Next came a scene from my room, showing me packing as Sophie entered with a coffee cup. Not long ago, that very cup had shattered again. The video ended with me approaching the camera and the room erupted into shock. Sophie lay on the ground, drained and in tears, with Liam kneeling beside her in stunned disbelief. I leaned back into Ethan's supportive arms, almost forgetting what the next clip held. Sophie forgetting what the next clip held. The screen went dark, and after 3 seconds, Sophie's voice emerged. "I really like this trophy, Arya." Gradually, the image cleared to reveal a much younger Sophie examining a crystal trophy engraved with my name. Arya as the recipient. "That was my trophy," the video narrated. In it, I sat on the couch, seemingly indifferent, as Sophie smashed the trophy at her feet, exclaiming, "Sorry, Arya, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have said anything. Don't be mad." Then Robert and Elaine entered, shielding Sophie as she attempted to defend me. "It wasn't Arya's fault. I was just too curious about the trophy. I never meant to hurt you, Mom and Dad." Their words only fueled the flames further as Elaine looked at me in disappointment. "How could I have a daughter like you?" The video continued amid flashing cameras and a live stream capturing the event in the banquet hall. Guests whispered in disbelief, "Oh my God, are they really sisters? Are those her real parents?" Liam seems clueless, but wasn't Liam engaged to Arya before switching to Sophie? Could it be Sophie's jealousy over her sister even taking her fiance? The murmurs grew louder until they drowned out one of the video's key moments, a celebration that had turned into a trial for Sophie. There she sat, clinging to Liam's arm, hoping he'd help her escape, yet Liam, appearing utterly shocked, stood, frozen, until Sophie brushed him aside. With Robert and Elaine occupied by the crowd, Sophie pretended to faint, sending guests scattering in alarm. Amid the chaos, Ethan tapped a microphone, his rich voice filling the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," people began to look around, eventually noticing Ethan and me on the second floor. He handed me the mic and I addressed the screen in a calm tone. "I hope today's show did not disappoint." I then looked towards Sophie, whose makeup was in ruins as she feigned unconsciousness. "Tell me, Sophie, are you satisfied?" she pleaded desperately. "Arya, have you lost it? You're pushing me," she cried, to which I finished mockingly, "Pushing you to your demise?" Sophie stood, utterly baffled. "What?" I chuckled, amused. "Isn't this exactly what you've been harping on for the past 20 years? Every time I achieve something, you pull me aside, envious, saying, 'I'm miserable, stuck at home while you get everything.' You always accuse me of taking it all from you." Sophie's voice trembled. "You drive me to destruction, Arya," I sighed and continued. "Maybe that's why I never believed you'd ever be a good sister. Sometimes I wonder if a sharp piece of glass would have been more useful than a family bond." The live stream continued at the edge of the venue. I swallowed my words and then softened. After all, today is Sophie's engagement party. Ethan's secretary delivered a small box to Robert and Elaine. I offered an apologetic smile as I explained I had a different gift planned. Inside is the title to a villa and the contract. Someone exclaimed, "Isn't that Ethan's resort?" "Yes, it is. It wasn't easily acquired. Consider it a generous gesture from me." As soon as Robert reached for the box, it closed on its own. I added quietly, "This is a gift. Let it be a consolation prize. It's rightfully yours." Elaine's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, Arya. Ignoring her sorrow, I turned to Sophie and said in a tone filled with childhood remorse, Sister, I'm sorry. This kind of situation will never happen again. I once apologized because I treasured our bond, and now I must again because I've truly messed up what you considered your lifelong pursuit of happiness. My entanglement with you ends here. The engagement party turned into a complete debacle. Ethan and I once again made headlines. The secrets from the previous engagement re-emerged, twisted by narratives that hinted at me having orchestrated everything, a script without proof. That notion, what kind of good sister would I be then, made me feel oddly relieved. The evidence had hit its mark, like a sensational novel unfolding. Little White Rabbit's revenge story? One guest mused, No, it's all villains here. Another chimed in, Am I the only one noticing that Ethan indulges her so much? She's acting out and he's just laughing it off. It was all too surreal. My parents bombarded me with calls, which I ignored, while a rather irritating man had shown up when the police investigated the photo scandal. Liam looked utterly defeated, and after the party, Robert's company took a nosedive. Liam was affected, as he always should be, since he had never been the reliable, hardworking type. Sophie ended up in the hospital. I raised my hand, signaling Liam to stop his incessant chatter. Enough, go back! But Liam blocked the door, saying, Arya, it wasn't my intention. He continued, On the day of the college entrance exams, I wanted to confess to you. I got drunk, and I'm not sure why it ended up being with Sophie. I stepped back, my voice cold. So that's what matters to you? You've had enough, Liam? Countless times you've made mistakes over the years. I stretched out my words. Did you ever wonder why Sophie was the one who found you that night? Liam's grip tightened as he looked at me in disbelief. What do you mean by that? I let out a sarcastic laugh and replied, The drug in your drink was placed by someone, and I arranged the text inviting me out on purpose so that Sophie would see it in the room where you two got together. That was set up by me as well. Why? Liam stammered. Because we were once engaged, I continued dismissively, and you never understood. I've been baffled by how you clung to me for so long. Liam froze, memories of dodging him in our youth floating back, and he looked almost shattered. I used to like you so much. What does that have to do with me now? I sneered. Don't you get it? I've despised you from the very start. The thought of having to marry you and being forced into your role was the worst period of my life. I simply handed you back to Sophie, as I always said I would. I wish you both a happy ending. After the engagement, our families severed ties completely. To avoid dragging us down further, the companies disassociated just in time. Liam's firm, already riddled with corruption, collapsed overnight. Robert and Elaine vanished from public view. Sophie was diagnosed with mild delusions and severe depression and was committed to a countryside sanatorium. Ethan reclaimed the 2 wedding presents given away at the party untouched, while Robert's house was seized. And Ethan ended up buying the company, facing immense compensation and no escape. They were forced to use the villa I'd given as collateral, repaying the kindness of my upbringing. The bond of sisterhood, it seemed, was too fragile to mend. This was the only gift I'd ever given them, a final chance to settle old scores. At last, I had some downtime. Unexpectedly, invitations from affluent families began pouring in, inviting me to visit, but we all knew their true intentions. They were interested in the man behind me. Thankfully, Ethan rejected them all, driving me back to the old family estate. There, in the familiar sitting room on a solidly colored sofa, Ethan's grandmother, her head full of silver hair, glared at me. Who is this girl? I don't recognize her. I hurried over and clutched her hand. Grandma, it's me, Arya. Surely you remember. She huffed. Who's Arya? I don't recall you at all. I shifted to her other side, affectionate. Grandma always said she liked me best. Please, don't be angry. I was simply busy dealing with some troublesome matters these past few days. At that moment, Ethan's grandmother turned toward Ethan with a reproachful glare. Arya's in trouble and you don't even help? Ethan shrugged and sank onto a nearby single couch. Doesn't look like she needs my help. Just then, Ethan's father descended the stairs, his dignified presence reminiscent of an ancient sword's sheath. Tall yet gentle, with a playful glimmer in his eyes. Arya's been quite the sensation lately. The punk might not even be able to help her, he teased. I looked up shyly. Uncle, you're here too. Your wife insisted I bring her over early. In a simple yet elegant dress, Ethan's mother followed behind his father, her tone soft. I thought we'd have a family meal. It's a perfect time for Arya to accompany me while we look at engagement dresses. Ethan's grandmother patted my head tenderly and remarked, without realizing it, the little girl has grown up. I nodded, feeling both emotional and pressured. Yes, from when I first met Ethan at 15. It's been 10 years now. Compared to that gloomy past, this old home feels like my true home. On the day of our rooftop engagement party with Ethan, everything he had secretly and meticulously prepared was finally unveiled. I lifted my skirt and swung open the door to reveal a room, empty of guests and media. Only our families were present. White roses, imported from far and wide, adorned the venue, and at the end of the red carpet on stage, there they stood. Ethan's mother leaned on his father while clutching a small gift box. Ethan's grandmother held a microphone, her voice gentle as it drifted on the breeze. Arya, welcome home. Ethan guided me closer and had me accept the box from his mother. Inside, I found a smooth, completely green jade bracelet. Arya, welcome home. The words resonated as tears welled in my eyes. I was momentarily speechless. How fortunate I was to have met and known Ethan since our youth. 10 years had passed and now everything was falling perfectly into place.